The pain was a jagged lightning strike, arcing through my midsection the second I reached for the water pitcher on the nightstand. It had been exactly 18 days since my invasive surgery, yet every twitch felt like a serrated blade was being twisted deep inside my muscle. I clamped my jaw shut, pressing my palm against the heavy gauze padding under my silk robe, praying the standing dizzy spell would pass before I hit the floor. That was when Marcus strolled in, eyes glued to a sports betting app, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife was gray-faced and trembling. "Just got off the phone with my mother," he muttered, not even looking up. "The whole clan is coming here for the holiday gala. 20 people, Elena. Martha wants the full 4-course spread." My breath hitched. I felt something inside me finally go broken. But it wasn't my stitches. It was the last thread of my patience. It snapped with a silent, deafening crack. "Marcus, I can't even stay standing for 3 minutes to brush my teeth," I managed to rasp, my voice vibrating with a lethal level of pain. He finally glanced at me, but there was no worry, only annoyance. "Mom said she'd bring the centerpieces. You just handle the kitchen and the recovery of the house. You know how she is about the great family feast. It's a 15-year tradition. I just had my internal organs rearranged by a surgeon." "Marcus," I said, my voice rising, fueled by the sheer absurdity of his demands. The doctor's orders were explicit: 0 lifting, no stairs, and absolute bed rest for a month. He dismissively waved a hand as if swatting a fly. "Oh. Stop being so dramatic, Elle. It's just Christmas dinner. My aunt has chronic back issues and she still hosts brunch." "You're fine." The phone on the counter shrieked before I could scream back. Martha flashed in aggressive, bold letters. Marcus tossed the device toward me like it was a piece of trash and walked out. I stared at the screen, my hand shaking, the recovery I so desperately needed being crushed under the weight of their entitlement. This wasn't just a request. It was a sentence, but as I answered the call, a cold, crystalline thought formed in my mind. If they wanted a dinner they'd never forget, I was going to give them exactly that. Martha's voice poured through the speaker like honey-dipped cyanide. "Elena, sweetness. I'm so glad you're upright. Now, listen, I've decided on a 12-pound, double-smoked honey ham this year. And Chloe is absolutely insistent on those Gruyere cheese puffs you made for the fundraiser. You remember the ones. Make at least 5 dozen, dear. They go so fast." The sheer toxic audacity of her tone made my stomach churn faster than the anesthesia ever did. "Martha," I whispered, leaning my weight against the cold granite of the kitchen counter to stop the trembling in my legs. I literally had my abdomen sliced open 18 days ago. I'm still on heavy medication. I can't even lift a cast-iron skillet, let alone prep a feast for 20. Oh, and for heaven's sake, Elena, let's have proper linens this time. Not like that tacky disaster last Easter when you used those flimsy paper napkins. It looked like a picnic at a rest stop. So common. "I had a 103-degree fever last Easter, Martha," I said, my voice cracking with a mixture of exhaustion and rising fury. I could hardly draw a full breath, let alone iron heirloom tablecloths. "Marcus told you I was sick. Stop being so dramatic and just cook. It's the holidays, Elena. It's about family, not your little physical inconveniences." Her laugh followed a sharp, tinkling sound like breaking glass that always made my skin crawl. "I'll bring the fine-boned china. You just focus on the menu. There will be 12 of us this year, including Sophie, and you know she's in her Afghan keto phase. So keep her portions completely separate, no cross-contamination, or we'll never hear the end of it." The line went dead before I could even draw a breath to protest. I stood there in the stifling silence of the kitchen, remembering every other holiday I'd bled for this family. I remembered hosting Marcus's 40th birthday dinner while battling a brutal case of food poisoning, shivering over a stove while they laughed in the next room. It was always tradition. It was always my sacred duty to be the invisible, unpaid labor. A sharp vibration in my palm made me flinch. A text from Chloe. "Mom says you're being difficult about the appetizers. Don't mess this up for the kids, Elle. We're all looking forward to a real meal." I shuffled toward the hallway mirror, my movements slow, ghost-like. The woman staring back at me was pale, her eyes hollowed out by months of being ignored, but the flicker of the submissive wife was gone. In its place was a cold, crystalline resolve. A slow, predatory smile tugged at my lips. "Fine," I whispered to the shadows. "You want a holiday you'll remember? I'll make sure it's absolutely unforgettable. I pulled up my contacts and dialed Jules. She had been telling me for years that I was being treated like a servant in my own home. It was time to tell her she was right, and that I was finally ready to enforce some boundaries. Jules, it's me, I said, my voice barely a thread, vibrating with a fatigue that went bone deep. You remember how you told me that I'd eventually reach my breaking point? That one day, I'd finally stop letting these toxic people use me as a doormat. About damn time, Elena, Jules's voice came through the line, thick with genuine concern and a touch of that I told you so energy only a best friend can provide. What did they do now? Is it Marcus? Or has the Dragon Queen Martha finally demanded a sacrifice? They want the full Christmas spread, Jules. 12 people. A 12-pound ham. 5 dozen cheese puffs. Handmade pies. All of it. Only 18 days after my stomach muscles were sliced open. They don't want a wife or a daughter-in-law. They want a kitchen appliance that doesn't complain. They what? Jules's explosion of pure, unadulterated outrage was exactly the medicine I needed. Oh, hell no. Elena, you tell them to shove their honey-glazed ham exactly where the sun doesn't shine. Better yet, I'm coming over with a suitcase and we are leaving tonight. I let out a soft, dry laugh, but it tugged painfully at my stitches so I stopped wincing. No, Jules. I'm not going to run away. Not yet. I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve. I'm going to provide the most expensive, most impersonal meal of their lives. But I need your logistical brilliance to set the boundaries they've spent years tramping over. I'm listening, she said, her tone shifting from protector to secret co-conspirator. First, I need you to scout every high-end takeout place in the tri-state area that delivers on Christmas Day. I'm talking about the places that charge a $150 premium just to answer the phone. The ones with the fancy gold foil containers. I paused, my fingers tracing the jagged ridge of my surgical scar through the heavy wool of my sweater. I need you to help me curate the ultimate revenge menu. A dinner that screams I'm done while I'm miles away in a state of total freedom. Jules's laughter was dark and delicious. The sound of a woman who loved a good justice story. Oh, Elena. Honey. This is going to be a masterpiece. A total holiday disaster for them, and a beautiful liberation song for you. From downstairs, I could hear Marcus's muffled voice on the phone with Martha. He was already talking about moving my recovery chair into the garage to make room for their oversized, 7-foot Christmas tree. They were literally planning their comfort on top of my physical agony. Let them plan. Let them assume they knew exactly how this holiday would play out. I opened my laptop with a grim, new sense of purpose. I wasn't just making a grocery list. I was building a digital vault. I started dragging files into a hidden folder I'd been quietly maintaining for nearly 4 years. It was filled with evidence. Every dismissive text message, every ignored medical bill, every recording of Martha's royal decrees, and every past holiday where I'd worked myself into a fever while they ignored me. This was my final act of reclaiming my respect. And they wouldn't see the storm coming until the first delivery driver knocked on the door. Okay, I've got the heavy hitters, Jules said, her voice dropping into a low, focused hum as she spread a dozen glossy, high-end takeout menus across my velvet coffee table. We've got the artisanal Thai fusion place, the 5-star Mediterranean bistro, and that new Michelin-starred Indian spot that usually has a 6-month waitlist. I had to personally guarantee a $250 holiday gratuity to the manager, but they're in. Every single one of them is delivering on Christmas afternoon. I shifted my weight carefully on the sofa, adjusting the surgical pillow to ease the constant, throbbing ache behind my stitches. My body was a map of pain, but my mind had never been sharper. Perfect, I whispered, looking at the vibrant colors of the menus. Order 3 extra copies of each. I don't just want them to eat this food. I want them to be surrounded by the choices I've made for them. I want to literally wallpaper the dining room with these menus. I want it to be my visual masterpiece. Jules paused, her eyes searching mine with a mix of awe and concern. You're absolutely cold-blooded, Elena. I love it. But seriously, how's the incision today? You look like you're breathing through a straw. The physical pain is worth every second of the karma that's about to hit this house, I replied, my voice steady. My phone buzzed on the table. It was another digital decree from Martha. Elena, make sure the cranberry sauce is infused with orange zest this year. None of that canned sludge. Also, Marcus mentioned you've been ordering a lot of prepared meals lately. That won't do for the family feast. It's a matter of respect for our traditions. I showed the screen to Jules, who let out a sharp, incredulous huff. Has this woman completely erased the fact that you literally had your internal organs rearranged 18 days ago? Does she think a major surgery is a spa day? Bold of you to assume she ever bothered to learn the details, I said, pulling out a heavy, expanding accordion folder labeled forensic documentation. I tucked my latest $14,000 hospital bill into the front sleeve. Marcus told her it was a minor laparoscopic tweak. He didn't want my health dampening the holiday spirit. He wanted me to stay the quiet, compliant wife. Jules handed me a thick silk finish brochure she'd pulled from her bag. Speaking of spirits, I found your sanctuary, Solace Springs Recovery Retreat. It's exactly what the doctor ordered. A private cedar cabin, 24-hour medical nursing staff on call, a view of the frozen lake, and a zero-contact policy for guests. It's the ultimate healing vibe. I looked at the photos of the serene, snow-dusted woods and felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of freedom. Book it, December 24th through the first week of January. Use the secret savings account Marcus doesn't know exists. I imagined the silence of that cabin, the absence of Martha's demands, and the absolute, beautiful fury that would erupt in this house when they realized I wasn't coming back to scrub the grease off their fine bone china. Every text, every recording, and every bill in this folder was a brick in the wall I was building between myself and their toxic entitlement. This Christmas wasn't just a meal. It was the final collection of evidence before I served them their true holiday surprise. After Jules left, I stood in the doorway of our designer kitchen, watching Marcus brew a fresh pot of coffee. He didn't offer me a cup, didn't ask if I'd managed to eat, didn't even look in my direction. He was a master of selective sight, a skill he'd honed over years of living with a woman he treated as background noise. The latest credit card statement arrived, I said, my voice like dry parchment as I placed the $15,200 hospital bill directly on the counter where he'd have to move it to get his sugar. Could you double-check if the joint account is funded? My personal card was flagged for unusual activity this morning. He grunted, finally picking up the paper with a flick of his wrist. Probably because you've been ordering takeout for every single meal, Elena. Honestly, it's getting ridiculous. You're home all day. Can't you at least boil some pasta? My mother is already complaining that the house smells like Thai curry instead of pine needles. His eyes caught the total on the medical bill, and for a split second, they widened. Jesus, L. Did you really need the private recovery suite and the specialized physical therapy? It's just an incision. Most people are back on their feet in a week. No, Marcus. I requested the extra layers of internal stitches just for the aesthetic appeal, I replied, turning my face away to hide the predatory flash in my eyes. The first piece of physical evidence was officially in his hands. He just didn't know it was a legal weapon yet, along with the digital recordings I'd been saving of his toxic outbursts. That evening, while the house was thick with the scent of his apathy, I began the process of claiming my freedom. I pulled a small, weathered suitcase from the back of the guest closet. As I folded my softest sweaters, I was hit with the memory of last Thanksgiving. I had been shaking with a 103-degree fever, cold sweat drenching my apron, but mother-in-law Martha had insisted that her special gravy couldn't be made by anyone else. I spent 7 hours on my feet, my vision blurring, then the entire night curled on the cold bathroom tile, shivering while they roared at the television downstairs. When I finally crawled to the door to ask Marcus for a glass of water, he just told me to keep the noise down because the game was in overtime. He had zero respect for the woman who kept his life running. I zipped the suitcase shut with a sharp, final click. I checked my encrypted email one last time. The Solace Springs retreat was fully paid, and the divorce papers tucked beneath my journals were ready for delivery. Elena, is dinner here yet? Marcus shouted from the living room, his voice echoing with impatience. I'm starving. It's being delivered, honey, I called back, my voice dripping with a honeyed, fake sweetness. Doctor's orders. Remember? I wouldn't want to jeopardize my recovery just before your family arrives. He had no idea that every homemade meal he'd praised for the last 4 days had actually been high-end takeout from the artisanal deli 4 blocks away, meticulously plated on our heirloom dishes to keep him blind. He was so busy enjoying the service that he never noticed the servant had already moved her heart out of the house. This was the quiet before the storm, the slow, methodical build toward my masterpiece of revenge. Let him sit in his comfort for now. His karma was currently out for delivery, and I was the one who had already tipped the driver. Christmas Eve descended upon the suburbs with a deceptive, snowy silence, but inside our house, the air was thick with the hum of the heater and Marcus's rhythmic snoring drifting down from the master suite. I sat at the kitchen island, nursing a bowl of lukewarm broth and watching a classic holiday film on my tablet. It was a bizarrely fitting backdrop, a story about a house being defended against intruders. Only in my version, the intruders were my own family, and the trapside set were made of paper and ink. The kitchen was a cathedral of clinical cleanliness. There were no flour-dusted counters, no oversized turkey thawing in the sink, no frantic chopping of herbs for the stuffing. It was empty, gleaming, and utterly silent. My phone lit up with Martha's 14th text of the day. Elena, I hope that bird is out of the freezer. Those potatoes aren't going to peel themselves. Be in the kitchen by 6 a.m. sharp if you expect the gravy to set properly. I took a slow sip of my soup, feeling a sharp twinge in my side, and added a screenshot of the message to my digital folder of evidence. The doorbell chimed, a soft, muffled sound against the snow. Jules was right on schedule, wearing a grin that could have outshone the neighbor's holiday lights. Ready for the final installation of your masterpiece, she whispered as I let her in. She was carrying a heavy roll of industrial mounting tape and a thick folder containing 45 vibrant, high-gloss takeout menus. Almost, I said, adjusting my robe. I lifted the hem of my sweater just enough to show her the dark, jagged line of my surgical scar. I was thinking, should I leave this partially visible tomorrow, just to ensure there's zero room for them to claim they didn't know the extent of my pain? Absolutely, Jules said, her eyes flashing with a protective fire. Let them see the physical price of their toxic entitlement. It's time they realize their traditions are built on your blood. We worked like two ghosts in the dim light of the dining room. Methodically, we began taping the menus to the walls, overlapping the Thai fusion with the Mediterranean bistro, the Indian spice house next to the artisanal deli. We weren't just decorating. We were setting boundaries in the most visual way possible. It was a mural of my revenge. Remember the 3-pie disaster 3 years ago? I asked, watching Jules level a menu against the wainscoting. When Martha insisted I bake pumpkin, pecan, and apple from scratch because Sophie couldn't decide? And then Sophie didn't eat a single bite because she'd suddenly decided sugar was spiritually draining? Jules shook her head in disbelief. And Marcus just watched you bake for 10 hours while he tested out his new golf simulator in the basement. Exactly, I said, a cold sense of karma warming my chest. Tomorrow, the only thing being served in this room is a lesson in respect. My getaway bag is already in your trunk, right? Programmed and ready. The retreat is expecting you by 10:30 a.m. I looked at the dining room one last time. The menus gleamed under the chandelier like a paper testimony to years of being taken for granted. This was my declaration of freedom. Let Marcus sleep. Let them all dream of the feast they think they're owed. Tomorrow, they'd learn that when you treat family like staff, the staff eventually goes on strike. Christmas morning arrived with a blinding, frigid brilliance that felt like a fresh start. I dressed with surgical precision, a soft, oversized cashmere sweater that draped loosely over my bandaged abdomen, comfortable leggings, and my most expensive leather boots. If one is going to serve a cold dish of revenge, one should look absolutely impeccable while doing it. Marcus had vanished 2 hours ago to play the dutiful son, driving across town to pick up Martha and her mountains of luggage. He hadn't even bothered to ask if I wanted a sip of water, let alone breakfast. At 10:15 a.m., Jules's SUV slid into the driveway, tires crunching softly on the fresh powder. I stepped out, the crisp air filling my lungs for the first time in weeks. Right on schedule, she said, her eyes scanning my face as I climbed into the passenger seat, my getaway bag already secured in the back. You look like a woman about to reclaim her soul, Elena. That's exactly what I'm doing, I replied, pulling out my phone. My screen was already a graveyard of demands. Martha, we're 5 minutes away. The house better be warm and smelling like cloves. Chloe, Sophie is starving, so I hope those appetizers are plated and ready. Derek, better not have overcooked the ham this year. Last year was like chewing on a shoe. I switched my phone to silent and tucked it into my bag. Let them shout into the void. At 10:45 a.m., we parked 2 blocks away, and I opened the Ring camera app. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck in high definition. I watched Martha's sedan pull up, followed by Chloe's massive SUV. They gathered on the porch, arms overflowing with presents they'd expect me to wrap and decorations they'd expect me to hang. Martha tried the handle still locked. "Where is she?" Chloe's voice was tinny but clear through the porch speaker. "Mom, I thought you said she'd have the door open and the cider heating." Marcus finally unlocked the door, and the horde poured in, their voices echoing through the vaulted ceiling of my empty house. "Elena!" Martha's voice was a sharp command. "Why is the oven off? Where is the food?" "Something's wrong," I heard Marcus mutter, his footsteps heavy as he moved toward the kitchen. "The stove is cold. There's nothing here." Then came the scream. Not of pain, but of pure, entitled shock. Sophie had wandered into the dining room first. "Oh my God. Mom! Look at the walls." The camera caught their faces as they converged on my masterpiece. Martha's mouth dropped open so wide I thought she might unhinge her jaw. Chloe actually stumbled back into the sideboard. Marcus looked like he'd been struck by lightning, his face draining of all color as he stared at the 45 takeout menus covering every inch of the wainscoting. Derek picked up the note I'd left in the center of the table, weighted down by the Servant of the Year ornament Martha had gifted me 3 years ago. He read it aloud, his voice shaking. "To my beloved family, enjoy selecting your holiday feast. Every menu on these walls is prepaid. I am currently resting per surgical necessity. You may direct your complaints to the surgeon's office or the nearest delivery driver. Happy holidays." "Is this a sick joke?" Chloe shrieked. "Where is she? Where is our dinner?" Marcus pulled out his phone, finally seeing the final text I'd sent to the family group chat. "I'm off to reclaim my peace. Forward any leftover egg rolls to my lawyer's office. Enjoy the karma." "She can't do this." Martha was turning a terrifying shade of crimson. "It's Christmas. We're family." "Family?" I whispered to Jules as we watched Martha begin to tear a Thai menu off the wall in a fit of rage. "It's time to show them what I really think of this family." I hit send on the mass email I'd prepared. It contained every bit of evidence I'd gathered. The photos of my bloody surgical site, the $15,000 in medical bills Marcus ignored, and the recordings of Martha's verbal abuse. I included the divorce papers as the final attachment. Through the screen, I watched them all grab their phones simultaneously as the notifications chimed. The silence that followed was the most beautiful Christmas carol I'd ever heard. Martha's face went from red to a ghostly sickly white. Chloe sat down hard on a dining chair, staring at the screen. Marcus looked like he was going to be physically ill. "She recorded us." Chloe's voice was a jagged whisper. "Every word. The surgery. Martha, look at this photo. It wasn't minor at all. Marcus, you told us she was faking it." I didn't know." Marcus stammered, his world collapsing. "I told you every single day," I whispered to the phone screen, my heart soaring with a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in a decade. "You just never listened." Jules shifted the car into gear. "Ready to go, Elena? One last thing." I sent a final text to the group. "Oh, and Martha. Don't worry about tradition. I've started a new one. It's called respect. Merry Christmas." As we pulled away, I caught one last glimpse of my house in the rearview mirror. 7 entitled people standing in a room full of takeout menus, finally being served exactly what they deserved. We were heading toward the mountains, toward a retreat where no one would ask me to cook, and toward a future where I was finally, legally, and spiritually free. The main lodge at Solace Springs was a masterpiece of architectural silence, all warm timbers and floor-to-ceiling glass that framed the snow-heavy pines. As I checked into cabin 9, the receptionist gave me a look of pure, professional empathy. She knew I was here for medical recovery, but I think she sensed I was also here to escape a lifetime of betrayal. My phone, currently resting on the hand-woven rug, was a glowing rectangle of pure chaos. I had posted a summarized version of my story on a popular internet forum titled, "Am I the jerk for serving my in-laws a wall of menus instead of a turkey?" While Jules was driving, by the time I reached the retreat, the post had exploded into a viral phenomenon. Over 28,000 upvotes. The comments were a tidal wave of support, with thousands of people sharing their own stories of toxic family members and holiday humiliation. One user called it the Takeout Manifesto. I scrolled through the vitriol from my family. Martha's texts had shifted from "return this instant" to "you have destroyed our social standing." Chloe had posted a vague, weeping video on social media about how some people have no heart, but the internet wasn't buying it. People in our local neighborhood group were already asking why a woman 2 weeks out of major surgery was being forced to cook at all. My phone buzzed with a call from Marcus. I answered this time, just to hear the sound of a man realizing his throne had turned to ash. Elena, where are you? The kids are upset, and my mother is, she's in a state. We can fix this, okay? Just tell me where you are. I'm exactly where I should have been 18 days ago. Marcus, I said, my voice steady, reflecting the mountain silence. I'm in a place that understands boundaries. You didn't just ruin one dinner. You ruined 15 years of respect. Check the evidence I sent you. Watch the recordings. That's the woman you let your mother treat like a servant. I hung up as Jules texted me a screenshot. Martha had actually tried to call my surgeon's emergency line to complain that his medical restrictions were exaggerated and had ruined a family tradition. Dr. Sterling had apparently threatened her with a harassment suit before hanging up. As I sat in the dining room of the lodge later that evening, I wasn't the one cooking. A professional chef served a beautiful, quiet meal of roasted duck and root vegetables. No one screamed. No one made demands. I looked at my phone one last time before turning it off. The revenge was a masterpiece, but the peace was the real gift. I was finally claiming my freedom, and it tasted better than any home-cooked meal ever could. It was the dawn of a new life, and for the first time in forever, I felt whole. Exactly 7 days after the takeout revolution, I walked back into my house at 7 a.m. sharp. I wasn't alone. David, my sharp-tongued attorney, stood beside me, carrying a leather briefcase that felt like a shield. Marcus was slumped on the sofa, looking like he hadn't slept since Christmas. His career was in freefall. Apparently, his colleagues had seen my viral post, and the HR department didn't take kindly to a senior manager who gaslit his recovering wife. Elena, thank God, he croaked, standing up. We need to talk about fixing this. No, David interrupted, his voice a cool, professional blade. You need to sit down and listen. That's all. I set my bag on the marble island, the same island where I had bled for his family's comfort, and pulled out a thick envelope. These are divorce papers, Marcus. I've already signed every page. His face went ashen. Divorce? Because of a dinner? It was one meal, Elena. It was never just one meal, I replied, my voice devoid of the old tremor. I pulled out my phone and played a voicemail from Martha left just 2 hours ago. You ungrateful little viper. Ruining my son's reputation after we gave you everything. That's your mother-in-law, Marcus. That is the toxic environment you call family. I laid out the evidence systematically. The $15,000 in medical bills he ignored, the Ring camera recordings of his mother barging in, and the screenshots of his dismissive texts while I was in agony. This is the karma you invited into this house. You chose her comfort over my survival. Now, I'm choosing my freedom. David stepped forward. My client is requesting an equitable division, including the immediate sale of this property. The front door slammed open. Martha stormed in, her face a mask of blind fury. What is this? Who are you? Perfect timing, David said, holding up his phone to record. Mrs. Weber, I'm Elena's counsel. Would you like to explain on record why you're entering this house without an invitation? Martha froze, her mouth snapping shut like a trap. The silence was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. For 15 years, I had no boundaries. Today I had a fortress. I'm done being your personal chef, I said, looking her in the eye one last time. The takeout menus are yours to keep. I hope the bitter taste of your own actions is enough to satisfy you. As we drove away, leaving them in the ruins of their own entitlement, I didn't look back. I had a new house to find, one with a kitchen where the only thing being served was respect. My holiday revenge was a masterpiece, but this life was finally mine. The cafe was bathed in the soft, unapologetic light of a Sunday morning. I sat by the window, sipping a dark roast that I hadn't brewed myself, watching Martha and Marcus fidget in the booth across from me. They had practically begged for this meeting through David, promising they only wanted to make things right. Well, I said, setting my cup down with a deliberate, metallic click, you asked for 10 minutes. The clock is ticking. Talk. We miss you, Elena, Martha began, her voice brittle, stripped of its usual regal authority. The family. It just isn't the same without you. The house feels empty. You mean the kitchen feels empty, Martha, I corrected, my voice as calm as the mountain lake I'd recently left. I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table. Have you seen this? It's currently the top post on the front page of the internet. The title read, "Am I the jerk for leaving my family with nothing but a wall of menus on Christmas?" Their faces went a sickly shade of gray as they realized the world was laughing at their entitlement. You shared our private business with strangers. Marcus stammered, his eyes darting around the cafe as if looking for a place to hide. Was it private when Martha tried to harass my doctor? I asked, leaning back and feeling the incredible strength in my fully healed abdomen. Was it private when Chloe mocked my surgery on her social media? Every time you ignored my boundaries, you made our business a public matter. The door chimed, and Jules walked in, looking like she'd just stepped off a runway. She sat down beside me, placing a thick, legal-grade folder on the table, the final collection of recordings, evidence, and divorce papers. The house sold for 20% over the asking price this morning, Jules announced, her smile sharp and bright. The paperwork is finalized. Elena is officially a free woman. I'm not here for an apology, Marcus, I said, looking him in the eye. I'm here to say goodbye properly. I heard Chloe's Easter dinner was a disaster. Something about a burnt ham and store-bought sides that Martha refused to touch. Marcus looked down at his cold coffee. Mom had to order pizza. It wasn't the same. Karma has a funny way of delivering exactly what's needed, I said. I pulled out a final check, his half of the house sale, and slid it toward him. Here. This is the price of our marriage. I'm valuing myself over years of being treated like a servant. There's a difference. Martha stood up abruptly, her old toxic fire flaring for a brief second. This is ridiculous. Elena, you're throwing away a legacy over one dinner. No, Martha, I said, standing up with Jules. I'm starting a new legacy. One built on respect and self-love. You're right about one thing, though family is forever. That's why I've decided that I am my own primary family from now on. I blocked Martha's number right there in front of them, linked arms with Jules, and walked out into the fresh spring air. I didn't look back at the cold coffee or the hot consequences left at that table. My revenge wasn't just served cold. It was served with a side of absolute freedom. And for the first time in 15 years, the only thing I was cooking up was a life I actually wanted to live.